Welcome to Native Calgarian and Mossy for listening. I'm your host, Michelle Robinson, speaking to you in Mohkinstsis in the Blackfoot Confederacy, home of the Niitsitapi, Tsuut'ina Dene, and the Yiharhi Nakota. I talk about history, current news, unheard news, book clubs, with special guests to give local or national issues a voice through an urban Satu Dene lens. My life's work will be to honor the voices of my ancestors and next generation with humor, love, and truth. Reconciliation is work, not performance. May we honor all Indigenous voices with that courage. Oki Naganago, Meko Che Chestakomaki, Dekos Nagotine Siku. My name is Michelle Robinson. I am Satu Dene. I use they, them, and we are here in Mohkinstsis. We normally would meet in the Forest Lawn Library, but because of COVID, we switched to online. And as a result, we now do via Zoom all of our book clubs. And when they tried to reopen everything, I wasn't comfortable. For those who know, Fred Sasakamoose, one of the people that we had here for his book, I Am Indian, he wasn't really here as his son Neil came on his behalf because he's my uncle and he died of COVID. So, I found that the bureaucracy of Calgary Public Library wouldn't really work with me. So that's why we decided to just continue doing it online. So that's why we're here. And I always want to acknowledge that we're on Blackfoot territory. The Blackfoot have been maintaining these lands since time immemorial. So we have the Kainai, the Bagani, the Siksika, and south of the border, the Blackfeet Nation. I always acknowledge this is now Treaty 7 lands as well, and that included the Goodstoney, the Chiniki, and Bearspaw nations of the Stoney Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina, who are the Dene. And I acknowledge all First Nation, Inuit, Métis as the keepers of these lands in Turtle Island. And with that, I welcome everybody. And for folks who are new here, we let Indigenous people speak first. And when they're the author, we definitely let them speak first. So we'd like to welcome you here, Andrea, and I'll allow you to, introduce yourself in your way.
Sure, thanks, Michelle. So hi everyone. Danse, to wow, welcome. So I'm over in Treaty 6 territory, the ancestral lands of the Blackfoot, and as well as the Cree and what are we? The Nakota Sioux, as well as the Métis. So Edmonton used to be called Beaver Hills Lodge or Imiskuchi Waskagan in the Cree language. And that's where I work, downtown Edmonton or University of Alberta. I don't know who attended University of Alberta, but that's where I'm working on North Campus there. I live in Camrose, though. And I used to work in Mohkinstsis. So I'm kind of like, I kind of want you to be more south. But Camrose is where I'm at. I love it. It's a small town. Everyone drives 30 kilometers per hour. It's something to get used to. Especially at Calgary, everyone was honking at me. Everyone drives fast there. But anyway, so I'm Métis, originally from the Red River settlement. But my ancestors, we followed Louis Riel, and we fought against the federales, the federal government. And a lot of my ancestors died. Some lived, some were jailed, and they more or less farmed in the Saskatchewan area. So my dad's side is Métis. So my dad and mom met in Hudson Bay, Saskatchewan. I don't know if anyone's from Saskatchewan here. Nope.
Yeah, a little bit of roots there. I only have my dad who's from Yorkton, so.
Oh, my auntie lives in Yorkton, my Métis auntie.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, so then they moved to BC for jobs, northern BC. So I grew up in the unceded territory of the Letletene, so that's BC. I grew up there. And then I went all over for school. But anyways, I'm Métis. And then I signed on with the Métis Nation of Alberta. So I'm a Métis Nation of Alberta because that's how the Métis work. We can go wherever and sign up with whoever. But that's another story for another day. So that's me. So yeah, so I'll just pass it on, Michelle.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks again. My dog is whining like we allow four-leggeds on the podcast as well as the book club, and he's crying. So I had to, I don't know, figure out why he was crying. So funny enough. Anyway, I have two funny stories for you. First funny story is, so it turns out there are two accomplished Andrea Menards who are Métis in the world, both in yeah. So I reached out to the first one, who's a songwriter, and I realized my mistakes. I'm like, in her book, she says she's a lawyer. Why would she consider? Oh my goodness. So then I messaged her and said, sorry. And she laughed. We had a good giggle about the whole thing. And you had reached out. Well, I had reached out and you had said, yeah, no, this is great. I'm like, yes, I hope she can come. So that was wonderful. And I appreciate you wanting to do that. I did reach out to the co-author as well. I did notice that, there's all those videos that are available and such. So I did see a little bit of that. I'll talk more about that later. So anyway, the second silly thing that had happened was that I actually lost your book until this morning. I was walking around with it because Richard Van Camp came here. I don't read books. And I was reading all of these books like a wild. Oh, yeah. And so I found it this morning. And I read it real quick because I'm like, it was a real quick read. Oh man, I couldn't. So those are the two silly things I had to tell you that had happened as a result. But the good news is my sheets are clean, one. And two, I was able to read through this quite quickly, but then also get through I found your YouTube and I found the website. And so I thought I was going to talk a bit about that with you as well and what your journey with Mark was like, because he was so grateful to you and said, oh, I'm so happy that, you were willing to put up with me and teach me. And as another Indigenous person to another Indigenous person, some days those are taxing days. So yeah, it was wonderful to read all of that, and so I wanted to tell you about that. But I'm also just gonna quickly, Kat. I know, one, it's your birthday, happy birthday, but two, I want you to do a little bragging, and if you don't, I'm gonna like continue the bragging that I want to hear from you. So I'll let you introduce yourself and a bit about what you do and who you are.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm honored to be here and I'm honored to meet you, Andrea. Do you say Andrea or Andrea? Andrea?
The second one, yep.
Andrea.
Andrea.
Okay. Yes, very good. Yes, I am Kat, and I am a white settler who was born on Treaty 1 territory. My ancestors settled in Winnipeg, and that's where I was born. My paternal ancestors settled in Treaty 4 territory, so in Saskatchewan. So I know of what y'all speak about Saskatchewan. I have that side. I'm a member of this book club, and I've also started my own book club right after I met Michelle. And it's been going for 5 years. It's called Settlers Book Club, and we read primarily Indigenous authors and also Black authors and people with disabilities and anti-racism stuff. So it's a companion in a way to Michelle's book club, who I've learned so much from. I'm also a member of the Reconciliation Action Group. I guess I'm one of the founding members with Michelle and Rosemary, actually. So I am an artist who works in retail, and pretty much my whole practice now is anti-racism work. So yeah, that's about me.
Kat, Kat's not just a member of the Reconciliation Action Group. She's the linchpin in terms of keeping us organized and initiating different things. So you're to be commended for that, Kat. So I'm Rosemary Brown. And I use she and her pronouns. I'm a white settler of European origin, and I was born and raised on the stolen lands of the Onondaga Nation in upstate New York. But I've lived here in Mohkinstsis for, it's kind of scary, like 48 years. I go by the age of my oldest son. That's how I know how long I've been here. Um, I'm the mother of three. I'm the grandmother of seven, and I'm a community activist. I work with an anti-poverty group as well as Justice for Palestinians and the Reconciliation Action Group. And to echo Kat, we've all learned so much from this book club, just the consistency of reading, discussion, and I also attend Kat's book club, so it's fantastic, really. Thank you, Michelle and
Oh,
Kat.
so honored. And Rosemary, I'm gonna brag a little more for her too, because Rosemary was part of the, original group of people really working on anti-racism within the white settler groups long before we were even having conversations about reconciliation. I was talking to my daughter about that today because she's in the middle of social and had questions about this and that. And we were talking about the 9/11 truth movement. And I was telling her before the Reconciliation Action Group, or before, sorry, the Reconciliation Commission was active in doing their work. That was the only space I could talk about, the atrocities that the Canadian government had done. Because at those days, it was still, oh my God, we did you folks such a favor? I know the dialogue wasn't there, right? So, and these folks were like, these were family members of the 9/11 victims, right? So, they had a lot of, we want justice. And when they had their report, they were like, this is Swiss cheese. And that was where I met this wonderful activist, Splitting the Sky, John Boncourt. He was one of the folks here when they had the G7 meeting with George W. Bush. We protested Dick Cheney. We protested George W. Bush, but he got arrested for calling out the U.S. government. He was in Attica, actually, when they had done the riots. So he has since passed. And I was going to do that book for the book club because we have the G7 coming back to Calgary. And I thought it was important to memorialize him and remember that. But I'll probably do a whole podcast or something about that once I reach out to his family. So we'll see. Yeah, so that's like the wild history of here. And then when I started the book club in 2016, that was when Carolyn Bennett was like, we need to have hashtag Indigenous Reads. So the nonprofit I was with, 12 Community Safety Initiative in Forest Lawn, they were like, yeah, let's do that. So they supported me. That founded the library. At the library, we did it in the basement. And Rosemary and her husband would come all the way from the other side of Calgary. And as you know, an hour drive easy in order to go from one side to another in the middle of rush hour traffic. And we had a few other folks that were like, this is where they started. And then once you have knowledge, of course, you have to act, right? So I've found that people who are part of the book club and know better do better. And that's been the great thing about that. And reading your book, all I kept thinking was that's what Mark and his family's journey is that they know better, so now they have to do better. And I thought the infrastructure you guys created, not just with your book, but with the website and with the YouTube, was so similar to what the Reconciliation Action Group is trying to do in some ways. Like we do a little different in the sense that we put out press releases and tried to hold settler organizations to account, referencing the TRC or the National Inquiry or UNDRIP, or we started including the National Indigenous Economic Strategy as well, because we're in Calgary and as you know, people only talk about money here, right? So kind of that bigger conversation. So I just found so much similarity. I found inspiration as well. So I wanted to ask you a bit about, what made you do the book, what made you do the website, and what is that process like for you?
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Michelle. Okay, so Mark's a big city kid. And if you read it, Mark was actually born in Hong Kong. I mean, that's
Right.
huge, mega. Yeah, and then his family moved to Toronto because his mom wanted to feel more comfortable. I think because she comes from England. But anyways, that's besides the point. So Mark and I met at our Masters of Law program at Osgoode Hall Law School. So I had to go. So it was pre-COVID. So I had to go all the way to the big smoke of Toronto, Idaho, all up at this fancy dancy building on Yonge and Dundas. It's all glass. Everything's so fancy. And that's where I met Mark. And the LLM was a real intensive course. So I would fly into Toronto and we'd do 5 days. It was like, oh my goodness sakes, it was like 8 to 5. So, they actually fed us lunch as well. So it was a real bonding moment. I do really well in cohorts. So it was a real bonding moment for the Master of Laws program. So we had to do lots of role modeling and role playing and stuff because it was a dispute resolution masters. So it was a little bit more fun. It was more fun than the usual law that's really boring and dry. So I saw a lot of creativity in Mark. Plus, he wore full linen suits, which I really appreciated. And he was just really jazzy, gentle, nice, and it seemed like he knew a lot more than the lawyers in the group knew. And Mark has he had 20 years by that point in mediation. 20 years, yeah. And so he's half South Asian. So, yeah, and I didn't know that because I'm just a kid from the sticks. And so anyway, I didn't realize his name, Mark Bala, was Bala. It's Indian. It's South Asian. So
Sure.
anyways, yeah, yeah. So I wanted to call us like both half breeds, the half breed kids, but we opted for something that would include others. And I find Toronto, especially Toronto, behind. So, yeah. So I included Mark on my journey because I was tired of being alone. I was tired of being alone. And sometimes I talk past people's heads. So, and especially when I'm reaching out to people who really don't know anything. So I wanted Mark, he's so kind and gentle. I wanted Mark to kind of be my yin to yang. So he would, if I was going off on a tangent, he could, you
Probably
know,
you.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we could learn together. So heck, I've known Mark for 2018, since 2018.
Mhm.
So Rosemary, I don't know how you count from 2018. Anyway, 7 or 8 years. So I asked Mark to be an ally because I thought him and I had a lot of commonalities in that we liked hip hop. And he was so fantastic with his role plays. Um, I just like the artist in him, and he's not like a full-blown artist or anything. He's a mediator. So he was well-rounded, he's holistic. So that's why I picked him. And he says, yeah. And then, so him and I grew this authentic allyship project together.
Nice.
Yeah, it just was grassroots. It's not anything super planned. And he's just a really kind, gentle, uh, no, gentle, jazzy guy. He's not, you know how people with charisma kind of are sneaky, sneaky snakes. So he doesn't have charisma in that way, but he has a really gentle, loving nature.
That's
So
great.
yeah, and then so he's taught me things as well. Like he has 3 kids. And you know how the younger generation is actually teaching the older generation about Orange Shirt Day, about like this is what's going on. So he has daughters that don't want to celebrate Canada Day. He has one daughter, she turned 12, and she's like, Dad, why are we celebrating Canada Day? I don't want to celebrate Canada Day. So his stories from the settler side really mesh with my stories from, burn everything down and throw it in the dumpster side. And kind of mellow, like that girl's intimidating. So he's really nice. Anyway, so we work well together, and he started the website, so that's all him.
Amazing.
And then Yeah, and then him and I were doing a lot of educational workshops. So we have like a real simple handbook that we give out, and we were doing educational work for like lawyers,
Yep.
and some libraries too. And then him and I just decided to do a really short and sweet book on who we are and what I don't know what we wanted to put in here. So I thought it was fun, and it's just a fun little short piece. I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, I
So
loved
yeah,
it. And
yeah.
one of the things I love the most about it, oh, this is another continuation of the ridiculous stories I told you. One of the things I love about your book is that part of the purchases go towards the Moose Hide campaign. So when I had lost my book, I went to Amazon to rebuy it because I'm like, worst case scenario, I'll get a second book and I'll give it out to somebody. But then they canceled it on me because whatever, I don't know why. So I'm like, of course you're going to cancel on me. So I was like, I have to find this book today. So I did. And I'm so glad I did because I knew it was like a quick read. I knew that. I flipped through it. And I'm like, oh, this will take me 5 minutes. And then I lost it for like 2 weeks. Couldn't believe it. But I found it and I was really happy I did because one of the things I love the most too is how much citations you have in the back. Whether it's his story or your story, there's tons of citations. There was a few definitions in here that you included, and for me, like I get a lot of requests for a lot of different things, and I went to SAIT for geomatics, so I kind of focus on like land acknowledgement. That's what I focus on, just because that's what I know most. But I did present once for like the Alberta Law Society in the South. And I think that if I would have referenced like a book like this and you both, that maybe they would have like heard it different. I don't know. Or maybe encouraged them to reach out to you. I don't know. Either or, I just love books like this and to get to know it and get in it so then I know who I can reference later when talking to different settler groups about whatever topic. And if you're both lawyers, obviously, you know how to speak to lawyers in a way that they get it. So to me, I thought this was really important for people to know about for no other reason than, I mean, as you know, our biggest barrier right now is the injustice system. And, even if we do get the police to do the right thing, then getting, the Crown, getting lawyers, defense lawyers, Gladue reports, all the rest of it. Like there's so much to unpack there, as you know, and as my whole team here knows, actually, I'm just going to brag about what they did today. Today, well, right now, which is not fun or good in any capacity, is that there's a young man missing, and he's missing up north, and one of the family members of him, his name is Justin Christian. He's missing. They found like this big thing, and they said the cops won't help us. So the Reconciliation Action Group put out to Peace River RCMP, put out this statement being like, come on, guys, like, what if he's still alive? What if we can help him? What if we can get him home tonight? Right? What if you could engage with the family in a good way? So simple, but yet we're still fighting for that, right? And my worry, and I didn't know how to frame it before it was ready to go out, but something to the effect that I think of Colin Boushie and Colton Boushie, when he was shot, the whole thing was left open, and then it snowed, and then so like they didn't do proper forensics, and I'm like, what? What? Like I couldn't understand it then. I don't understand it today. And that's what I'm thinking about this case from what was described from the family members looking for him, and they're initiating their own search because again, the RCMP aren't helping, so the statement is to kind of encourage, like, come on, guys, get it together, right? So for me, I was going to forward it again through my emails and be like, hey, what are you doing? Can I get a statement about this? Because I have the Native Calgarian podcast. And so then I can kind of push people at a different angle with that. And the hopes is to get movement in a good way. So for me, like this work on allyship is so critically important. Kat is doing that good work with her Settler Book Club to try to get that allyship momentum building within those circles. And then the Reconciliation Action Group, we have like kind of like a screening right? Where it's like, have you read the TRC? Have you read the National Inquiry? When you have, come back to us. Because we do get a lot of people that are well-meaning. Oh my God, we love natives. We just respect their culture so much. Can I make a drum? I want a ribbon skirt. That's not real allyship, right? Like we need systemic changes. So I want to ask you a question about systemic changes from your point of view. Um,
Mhm.
what kind of systemic changes have you really seen that you think, okay, well, like in the grand scheme of things, that's a good thing. But really, do you feel like there's been much movement when it comes to systemic changes?
No. Um, yeah. So it's all symbolic. And I find the people who really mean well, like they're all on their own. They're all like there's no I'm like, okay, so for example, I talk to physiotherapists, and physiotherapists have a regulatory body, right? The same as lawyers. Lawyers have a regulatory body. But each physiotherapist and lawyers on their own, and they're burnt out, and they're trying to do their own thing, and they're trying to wear an orange shirt, and they're trying to put pamphlets up and all this stuff. And I'm like, why don't you talk to your regulatory body and do some systemic change, do some group change? Everyone's on their own. And, so, but it's really hard because we got barriers, even though we're going to do systemic change, we got barriers everywhere we look, whether we're settlers and allies or Indigenous people. Just with your example of talking to the police, you're doing it on your own, and then you're asking for systemic change and no one's changing, and that's what I find as well. That yeah, so no, there's nothing going on.
I honestly, the best thing I've gotten from this book club, I thought all of the liberals would join it. Not one did. But we had a lot of folks who, typically identify as NDP who did join. And I was like, this isn't like the hope was to get everybody on board with all of this. But I was just shocked at how many people wouldn't even commit time to reading. I don't know. It's disappointing. And then, a big message I always say in my podcast is like, whatever your world looks like, if you're at work and have a reconciliation committee, watch a show, watch a documentary, listen to a podcast, whatever, have an unpacking together, whatever. And it is I just don't see that buy-in.
No, people are scared, and there's a couple things happening in my view. So the leadership is scared. So the leadership right now, they don't want to have anything to do with this, anything. There was a EDI, thing, and now everyone's clawing back. Okay, so and they lump in Indigenous initiatives with the EDI, even though we're
Right?
different. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then people feel guilty, so they freeze up. And then if an Indigenous person wants to do something Indigenous, no one says anything because they don't want to look racist, or they don't want to they just are frozen in fear. And so that's why I'm trying to develop a systems theory to tackle systemic colonialism, and for us to not keep on looking at each other, but to look the same way.
Yeah.
So instead of taking things personally and getting into each other's way, I'm like, let's develop a system based on systems theory. So I've called it right now. I used to call it the medicine wheel systems theory, but now I'm calling it first systems theory. But anyway, I've indigenized systems theory so that we can look at systems. What are the feedback loops
Yeah.
that are causing the homeostasis of colonialism in Canada today? I mean, Canada isn't an old country. It's only been 160 years, and colonialism is deeply entrenched in everything, making everyone so scared to do anything because it's there, and it'll take a lot of us to dismantle it, overhaul it, and people are. I find that wherever I go, there's people scared for a number of reasons. So I've just named one. It might be guilt. The leadership, it's fear and hatred and not understanding anything. But but we could talk about more about that. But yeah, no, I don't see anything systemic happening. Just cultural.
Symbolic.
Can I make a
Yep.
drum and romanticize about you and learn from you while you sing, an honor song?
A hundred
Yeah.
percent. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I I have actually been talking a lot more with some of the elders who like went through RCAP and just asked them like, how did you get over the fact that these were just ignored? And all this work went into it. And I just wrote a quick letter to the editor for Alberta Views. It's going to be published because they were having this debate about sovereign Alberta. Two white guys. And I'm like Wilton Littlechild's right there. Like you got these two conservative white guys arguing about sovereignty of Alberta. Like he was a PC. There's no reason why you couldn't have had him. This would have changed the whole dynamic of this conversation. But it's that Indigenous erasure, right? Like we're back to articles in the so-called progressive news cycle, and it's like complete Indigenous erasure. And it's like Alberta can't exist without us. Like I don't understand how you can't see that. But again, I have a geomatics background, and I just heard that North Battleford, their city council said, no, we're taking down the treaty flag. We're not going to acknowledge treaty anymore. And so I'm like, how are we here? Like, you guys can't be here then. Like, I don't want to kick people out of here. That's not something that I have yet to meet an Indigenous person that's like, no, get out of here. Other than, really ignorant people who are not really serious about this conversation, right? Um, it's a simple idea, you know, living together equally. And it is shocking to me how many people in power are so scared. I was going to let Rosemary know, your husband, I've been thinking about him a lot because Erica Eifel just did a podcast and she had spoke to this person who was from South Africa and she was talking about the apartheid. And, they talked about how violence, you know, ended up being how they had to do it. And so I was thinking about Don a lot and wanting to ask him to listen to that podcast and tell me what he thought of it. But I was going to send the email. And since you're here, obviously I'm going to tell you as well. But I, I know splitting the sky, John Boncour would be like, no, Michelle, you got to take up arms. Like, we're done. We're done. We're like, he was, extreme like that. And I don't know how extreme it is anymore to me. That's what I'm dealing with. That's what I'm struggling with that because, if we can't get the RCMP to look for our people, how else, like we have to go out on our own and do it. And that's always been that way, always. And that's not violent, at least, but it just shows the discrimination that, they're not going to help you no matter what. So it's like, why would we help you no matter what? I don't know. I don't know how to help the police anymore. I just don't.
Well, the RCMP and the police don't even have proper training on
No.
Indigenous people.
Agreed. I
They
should
do
send you
have,
that message then. You'll probably see it on my LinkedIn. I'll be posting it
yeah.
tonight. And we talked about that. That was the first call to action, 57, the anti-racism training, because it's supposed to be for all public servants. And I just don't see any movement there at all. And there's certainly no accountability for when someone is racist, right? And that's really problematic.
Yeah, there's the Human Rights Act in BC. I mean, here in Alberta, we just have a Indigenous Advisory Committee for the Human Rights, yeah, code. But in BC, they have a special category for Indigenous peoples. So, but yeah, we just have an Indigenous Advisory Committee. So if you do a human rights, complaint, they still don't grasp the Indigenous component.
No, they need major anti-racism training. I have a lot to say about that. I'd have to pause it. Kat, I want to give you and then Rosemary an opportunity to talk to Andrea. Tell her what you thought of her book. Whatever you'd like to say, ask questions since obviously we have so much solidarity.
Thank you. Um, Andrea, yes, I loved your book. I loved the part about you throwing the justice system in the dumpster and setting it on fire. I mean, symbolic revolution is always a favorite of mine. I agree with Michelle. I don't know how we are going to change things, and I don't really want to resort to violence, but sometimes, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, sometimes I don't. Yeah. I love the chapter on revolutionizing Canada, transforming the system from the ground up. A lot of what you talked about, Michelle has taught us about following the transformative change with the TRC and the MMIW and UNDRIP and all that stuff. And it's taken us, I mean, I should speak for myself. It's taken me a long time to internalize that and make sure that is part of RAG now. In every statement, we have to refer to all of these reports and work that has already been done. So yeah, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just promoting Indigenous voices, right? And I'm glad the book also mentioned white fragility, because that's we're also reading as part of RAG. We have a sort of a side group that's all about white settler, white supremacy, learning to be better and better white people. We're reading Nice Racism, thanks to Michelle's recommendation, and other folks too. But thank you for doing this book. I love that it's a quick read, because it means people will read it if it's not like a 500-page volume of academic text. But both you and Mark write in such a good way, and it's very easy to read. Even though it's a quick read, that doesn't mean the ideas aren't deep and profound, and you bring up a lot of really serious things. Yeah. I was thinking of, I was trying to think of a question, but I'm really glad that you are working on law students about reconciliation and, trying to get in on the ground floor before they've cemented their practices in their lives. But yeah, law students, I think, need the education as well. And isn't that a call to action? I think so.
That's call 28, isn't it, Kat? Yeah.
Yep.
I forgot to say that Mark and I teach now together. We teach dispute resolution at Osgoode Hall, LLM. I demanded that they create Indigenous or reconciliation component in the dispute resolution program. And then I said, Mark, I need your brain and your skills, and can we do this together? So now we're teaching together. Yeah, I forgot to tell you that. Yeah.
You say it in the book. Yes.
Oh, good.
That's
Good.
great.
So you know all about us. Good.
Not all, but yeah. That sounds like really great. How are you finding the response from the students that
They students, so it's not, luckily these aren't mandatory courses. So I get people who are interested. I get great people. I get great students. And I learn from them, and we walk together, right? So I teach and Mark teaches. We teach in a different way. It's not like top down. It's like we experience things together. So it's pretty beautiful. No, they're really open to it. And again, it's the same question that Michelle asked. Systemically, what are we going to do? Yes, we're all individualized, solo, doing our own thing. We're all good people, but systemically, where can we make changes? And if we do make a change, and everyone's such a beginner, like everyone who's 30 years old and up, or 20 years old and up, or 25 is such a beginner. So if I overcome something, I have to teach another leader something else, make them feel uncomfortable. They're not used to feeling uncomfortable. And then I'm the bad guy because they project onto me that they're feeling uncomfortable. Yeah, it's a lose-lose. So that's why I like allies, though, because they can soften things. But then,
Okay, but I will say this, Andrea. I had one of the students from the UFC over last night, and
yeah.
they told me how, our progressive ally was helping slag the shit out of me. Oh yeah, just slagging me. But the irony is, it's like the endorsement because they're showing their white fragility, right? Like it's like, oh, thanks for the
Oh,
endorsement. I wish I could send a thank you note.
yeah. I was gonna say you gotta. They go, you gotta keep them. They go sideways. You gotta keep them, right? We have to do it together. Let's just say that. Yeah. So thanks, Kat.
I'll be echoing some of what Kat said. Well, I'll try not to echo what Kat said, but but I agree with everything she said. And some of those are points I was going to bring up. What I really appreciated was uh, there's a very accessible way into some of the issues around allyship. And I was thinking of a book we read in Cat's Book Club, Living in Indigenous Sovereignty, where really it's all about how to decolonize oneself, how to be an ally. So some of the ideas, I mean, it's very similar, but you get to it quicker, right? And it opens up the discussion and the doors to that. So I appreciate that. Yeah, and I was very interested in your work in the law school, right? As an example of trying to bring about systemic change. And it's interesting that it's not a mandatory course, which of course makes me think of that mini revolt within the law profession for mandatory courses on Indigenous issues. And then all the lawyers who had to argue against that. And I think we pitched in with a letter, right, from the Reconciliation Action Group around that. But when I think of law school and law students I've met, uh, it just seems like the whole point of law school is to uh, assimilate people regardless of their racial background, whether they're Indigenous or not, male, female, trans, but to a certain culture of the legal profession and the way that you do things. And I guess the term that would include everything would be it's a colonial system. So the weight of so students, even students who are really interested, and they come to your course, are there ways after taking the course that there can be supports for them if they're trying to challenge, right, that overall structure in their other courses and with other instructors?
Oh yeah, they're hooped. They're hooped. I had one student who wanted to do missing and murdered Indigenous women in another class, and the instructor wouldn't let her. And it was a female instructor who specializes in human rights and EDI. I was
Wow.
like, what? I'm like, yes, you can do it in my class. Absolutely. What the hell's going on? It's because people are privileged who are academics in law, like they've come from really privileged backgrounds, so you're hitting another barrier. So, and a lot of my students the students who are interested in my course at U Calgary Law, a lot of my students are from different diverse backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. Uh, because they get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, so the cultural competency that lawyers had to take, I was working for the Law Society of Alberta when I created that. Yes. Not only did I co-create the modules with Envision Insight Group, I chose Envision Insight Group for the Law Society and for all 12,000 people who are at the Alberta Bar. But we also voted. So I know the inside scoop of the benchers voting and what everyone thought. Anyway, I know all the mix. Yeah. And then, so I created those modules. Now, it's really interesting because the Federation of Law Societies, it's kind of like a symbolic group for all the other provincial and territorial law societies. Law societies like, oh, okay, like yay, the federal law societies of Canada, they said this, we're going to try and implement it. Now, they're saying you have to do it mandatory. You have to do a mandatory course, law schools. Now, Calgary still doesn't have a mandatory course. And so I know that we're switching deans. They're trying to find a dean. But okay, so let me tell you the inside scoop of if you're so they get usually, so I'm going to speak off the cuff. They usually get an Indigenous female to teach the hard stuff, the emotional stuff, the stuff that guys won't touch, whether they're Indigenous or not, right? Guys are interested in other things, economic development, corporate, whatever. So usually it falls upon an Indigenous female academic's shoulders. And usually, if it's mandatory, the student in the West. Now, when I went out to Toronto, people don't know what's going on. They're like, what? Everyone loves it. Anyways, in the West, because of, Michelle, the history, and, people don't like Indigenous anything. So what happened at USask Law was a lot of the students were acting not very nice to the Indigenous female law professor. So what happened was the dean had to come in and finish teaching. So I'm talking to my Calgary law class. And I'm like, well, who's supposed to teach this class? Should it be co-taught so that you can play good cop, bad cop? Like, say, if Mark and I taught, we could probably do a really good job. But why does it have to fall on an Indigenous female academic's shoulders? And what's up with the revolt? What's up with the rudeness? What's up with because those students from USask Law came into my class at UCalg if they were transferring, and they knew so much more.
Yeah.
From taking that mandatory class. And it's called a Cree word. I can't remember what the Cree word is called, but they knew it was awesome. But there's so much racism and toxicity. What do you do? So then I was thinking, okay, so treat it like the lawyers in Alberta, where it's online, arm's length, online. You can turn off, you can shut off, whatever. Do that, but extensively. And then in the upper years, you can have courses like what Mark and I teach, or what I teach, reconciliation and lawyers. That's what I was thinking, because I do have techniques where I can be arm's length, like being online is helpful. And I have other techniques because I don't really leave myself open a lot for stupidity.
Honestly,
So you
how did
got
you
you
not
got to
take that
navigate.
personally, though? Like the Law Society vote. Like you developed that curriculum and they voted it. I couldn't believe the conversation. And then they
I
tried to
know.
really suppress it. Like we couldn't hear a lot of it. Like you know the inside
Oh,
stuff, and I don't expect you to say
yeah.
anything, but holy Hannah, I took it personally. I didn't even go to
Yeah.
Indian residential school, and I certainly did not develop that curriculum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was okay. So the the whole system needs to learn. Like even the Law Society of Alberta, they don't know what they're doing. They
No.
need education. So we have benchers. The benchers are not educated. They're cronies in
Mhm.
law who all know each other, who all vote for the same thing over and over and over again. So I'm not like, yeah, lawyers protested. 51 lawyers said no. The Law Society of Alberta is an issue as well.
Yeah. It sounds like
So
it's a problem nationally, really. That's
yeah,
just 13 different problems, really. So I really appreciate the work you're doing, my God. And when I first opened your book and I saw change your attitude, change your plan, there can never really be justice on stolen land, I immediately went to Spotify and found KRS-One, The Sound of the Police. Whoop, whoop. And I had to listen to that before I could even start reading it. It's perfect. Rosemary, did you get a chance to hear that song? It says it's 1993, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this will hit our demographic perfect.
That and that was Mark. That's a hip hop. That's hip hop, man.
Okay.
Yeah, that's hip hop stuff.
I promoted the
KRS-One.
book club today with on TikTok with that song, and I couldn't believe that it was on there. So,
I know. I love it. I love the hip hop. Now, Mark and I are obsessed with Snotty Nose Res Kids.
mhm.
So we follow them. So we tell allies like, hey, put like Indigenous stuff on your feed, on your social media feed, and then all of a sudden you'll get some Indigenous news. I was
Mhm.
just invited to Mark's class yesterday. He's teaching at York University in the mediation program. And all people, and this is in Ontario. So Ontario is so different. So all they wanted to talk about was trauma. And I understand coming from a trauma-informed place is really important to know. But I'm like, yeah, but we're much more than that, and you can learn other things. Like you don't have to, you can put stuff on your social media feed and start to learn an easier way. You don't have to go right into the heart, like, okay, now we're doing this, you know. And they thought that, and kids in my class, students in my class, they all think that it's going to be really heavy and it's more relational. I try and make it really relational
Mhm.
where we're experiencing things together and we're all in the present together. I once you go heavy, it's hard for me. And so I don't want to they can read about it, forget it, or we can watch a video on it. I'm not gonna go there.
I feel that. Oh my goodness. I I think I was a lot more surprised to how hard it would be trying to engage with folks because I assume people come with good faith, right, and good intent. But then
Mm.
you see people and the way they manage to go and justify their ridiculousness. There's no nice way to say it. I just got diagnosed with ADHD this year. I suspected it for years. I didn't really care. I'm like, whatever. I just don't care. But then when I started seeing it in my daughter, I'm like, oh, I gotta care. So that's why I had to do that work. But ironically, people call my group ableist because the National Inquiry as well as the TRC are not like audiobooks. And because of that, that makes me ableist. Not like the reports or the government. No, 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 no. All that hate is on me, right? And I'm like, did you read them? No, I know you didn't. But like, I don't get proper health care and you're putting this on me. Like, what the heck? So when people talk about trauma informed, I try to talk about that gravity of it, where it's like, you know, I have the Reconciliation Action Group literally watching these ableist, privileged settlers coming after me via email saying these horrific things. And they're all like bystanders watching it, like no biggie. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm glad we're all trauma informed here. So, like, I try to come from that angle when it comes to talking about trauma informed. It's like, how can you not see how horrible these words are towards me and all the other Indigenous people, and also not have any accountability for these folks at all for their horrific garbage that they're spewing? And so, when that's how I try to talk about the trauma informed lens, because it's like, I should be allowed to tell someone they're being ridiculous without it being a tone police, without it being, oh,
Oh
Michelle, you
my
need to be
goodness
so
sakes.
more welcoming, blah, blah, blah. Right? I don't put up with that, obviously. You know that I would never do that. But the point is the expectation by settlers for me to put up with that is
Yeah,
ridiculous. So when you talk
yeah.
about kind of being that arm's length, that's why I'm going to always have my book club on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm never going to
Yes.
do it in person again. I
Yes.
cannot do that. But also,
Yeah.
that's the wonderful thing about the podcast too, is that there's always that arm length where and it's
Yes.
never live, so that way, it's not a
Yeah.
harmful situation.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it is shocking to me how many Christians there are out here and
Yeah.
how little understanding there is on their role on reconciliation too. Like there's so much to unpack here, whether child welfare, et cetera, right? Like so many conversations. So I'm just glad that you wrote this. I can cite lawyers
Oh,
and I can cite
oh
the
yeah.
website, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I have a YouTube channel and I have my own website as well, but that I have Mark and I stuff on it.
And
But
it's not the
one
songwriter one, folks. Just telling
I
you.
know, I know. Everyone gets so excited. So Indigenous people love Andrea Menard. And then when I show up, they're like, "Who the hell is this?" I'm always a disappointment. So I'm so glad that, you guys, I didn't disappoint you.
It went the
But
other way,
Michelle,
where I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm asking a songwriter to talk about a lawyer's book.
it's so funny. She knows about me. So I get emails from her, invites for her kind of fancy stuff. I'm like, no, that's the famous Andrea Menard. You got to go. Oh, and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. So we always get emails back and forth. Uh,
I did
but
that.
but
Go ahead,
but yeah,
Rosemary.
yeah, Rosemary, go
So
ahead.
I have another question. Do you also teach at U of A? I got mixed up with all the different places you're teaching.
Yeah. So okay, so I'm full time, and I at U of A.
Okay.
But I'm in a special center where I teach professors
Wow.
how to indigenize and decolonize.
Okay.
But it's not mandatory. So I have good people.
Mhm.
Like not good, bad, but I have people who want to learn. And yeah, so we have it's like I call it kitchen table conversations, but we have like sharing circles. Those
Mhm.
were happening a lot. So it was doing things in an Indigenous way and also learning. You learn from an Indigenous person and you learn from them in an Indigenous way.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and a relational and, responsible and, we're all in this together. We're experiencing it. And yeah. And then, so anyway, I teach in professors and then I do sessional, like I'm at Osgood and I'm at UCal and
Okay.
here, there, everywhere.
Okay. What I wanted to ask is, I can't remember the exact name, but at U of A, there's an Indigenous Law Center
Yeah,
that
Wakotoan. Wakotoan.
yeah, and they've been doing a lot of work around Bill C-92.
Yes.
Are you hooked into that also?
Well, they're all my friends.
Okay.
And I can tell you about Bill C-92. Now, they probably won't write back. They're really bad. If you ask them, if I'm on this podcast to say that, cut it, Michelle. But Wakotoan Lodge has a lot of resource. Wakotoan Law and Governance Lodge at the University of Alberta. Go on their website. They have lots of resources there. They are doing a lot of talks on Bill C-92. I don't know if
Mhm.
you're on any like a news thing where they do special talks, but Naomi Metallic, Hadley Freeland, Corin Lightning, they all talk about it. So and we a lot of us are on the ground seeing it being played out in courts. And again, courts don't know what to do. So there's a lot of learning that needs to be done. And then, of course, the government is not supporting the Indigenous community. So now the Indigenous communities have to figure stuff out as well. So Bill C-92 is really, really interesting. Now, the whole shimbazzle is that Canada still has the final say. So Indigenous sovereignty is not really
Mhm.
happening in Bill C-92. It's still Canada has the final say. So there's, nooks and crannies in there. I can't remember what they are, but if this doesn't happen, then it goes back to this. They're still the decision makers. So
Right.
it's not good enough for me, but it's still incremental change. It's still your foot in the door there.
One of the issues that's come up, I don't know a lot about it, but lawyers here, like at Calgary Legal Guidance, have talked about um, because the Alberta government is so anti-Trudeau and the federal government that creates a big gap between what's supposed to happen what does happen in terms of supporting Indigenous parents and families
Oh,
who face
yeah. When I
apprehension, etc.
what even social workers. So when I worked for Legal Aid Alberta, social workers, I didn't realize that social workers were, I guess I was naive. Social workers wanted to place the children in care. They were like the enemy. I was like,
Oh,
I had a lot to learn, Michelle.
I know. I know. It's like so just to give you an idea about me, I was pretty just mainstream, like colonized native. When I was 29, we started trying to have a kid. I got pregnant. I was like, this will be my first time using EI, all of these things. Like, hopefully, I'll be able to go back to work within a year, that kind of thing. Experienced so much racism at the hospital, and I couldn't name it. I was 30 years old, and I couldn't really name it was racism. So now I'm 47, almost 48, been unpacking it for almost 18 years now. And not just learning what racism is, but colonization and, going through this whole thing at TRC with everyone else and the national inquiry with everyone else and understanding the gravity of it like everybody else. So it just changed everything and helped heal me so much more, not just my birth, but long before that as well. And so, for me, like social workers became the enemy like that, doctors became the enemy like that, nurses became the enemy like that. Ironically, I was anti-vax immediately. I'm like, I'm not letting you guys do a damn thing. I was pro-vax up to that moment. But I was so hurt by the system. I couldn't even vaccinate my daughter at that point, which was ironic because all of the people in my life today who are anti vax because of the COVID thing, they were shaming me about being the worst parent on the planet at the time my daughter was born. Like they were horrendous. Now they're the freedom fighters for all of our rights and freedoms health wise, but they sure weren't advocating for me when I was talking about getting midwifery funded in Alberta, things like that, right? Like, I'm like, isn't this a thing all Christians can get behind? Like, I could not wrap my head around it, but I didn't understand that as white presenting as I like to pretend I am, I'm not. And when I show up and people see a native, like, well, whatever she says we want to do the opposite of has become pretty much my norm, right? And before, I just didn't care. I'm like, whatever, you're all a bunch of racist, whatever. But now that now I can name it, and now I can say, hey, did you know RCAP? Did you know UNDRIP? Did you know this? Did you know that? In order to help guide people. But as you know, good faith conversations aren't for everyone. So, and I'm glad you're in good conversations with your students, right? Like they come in good faith, and that's what I find a lot of like, uh, um, kind of like a hit and run comes with a lot of settlers, and then they try to find the good little token Indian that just agrees with them and puts the spirit of the buffalo in them for $100. You know, that's who they want, right? Not the ones that'll tell you this is wrong. You can't just apprehend children. Um, that bigger picture, like it is unbelievable to me how people don't see the racism that's so clear and present. And a great example is the murdering of the CEO, but yet there's murders every day in New York that nobody seems to care about, right? You look at a Colton Boushie and the difference if it's a white person, et cetera, et cetera. I was glad to see Susan Sampson mentioned in here, and that Mark had just outright said, you have to follow Indigenous people. Um, I don't know how many times I have tried to tell non-Indigenous settlers who claim to be allies, like you have to amplify Indigenous voices. And I would get a private message from somebody, can I do this? Before they would just do it. I'm like, it's a public post. Why aren't you sharing it? Jesus Christ. Like, I can't wrap my head around this double standard that settlers have with Indigenous people. So I was happy to see him say that because I'm like, maybe if this non-Indigenous guy says it, enough natives or enough non-natives will get it and do it. So I really like there were some key messages in there that I thought were really important. And I have recently, well, not recently, I guess when it went down, Susan had a whole new group of friends that were trying to support her the best we could. I just felt awful that this is the status, right? Like somebody goes missing or murdered, and you have to friend their family members to see if you can support in any way. And it's a horrible way to meet people. A horrible, and I've been really trying to evaluate that lately, but it is just important to av- uh, amplify the voices of the family members. And I still don't see that buy-in yet from non-Indigenous. So I was happy to see him post or say that in his in the book here. That was one of those things. I hope people get a takeaway from that.
He's really diligent at consulting with me. Really, like the best I've ever seen. But him and I, he's not my boss. I'm not his boss. We're just friends. But he's very, very. I mean, I've never experienced that before. But it's really interesting to see all this grassroots, like Indigenous people are just doing it for themselves, and it's exhaust. Like I'm like, I bet you they're exhausted, like walking across Canada for someone, doing the red dress march all the time, and all the settlers are watching like it's a zoo. I do think that there's some differences. Like I think that I'm trying to unpack in my academic work that the social dominance theory. I feel like a lot of settlers have the tendency to dominate. And then, Indigenous people, we don't really have that. So I think we're made up of different things. And I think when we come together, dominance happens. So settlers not only have to learn about, but they need to unlearn. But it's so innate. It's very hard. I love Robin DiAngelo, by the way.
I do too, and I've seen so many black authors say, "Oh, she's just stolen from black people." But her first book, there was a Chicago prof in there who coined the term racial battle fatigue, and I was like, "That's what I'm experiencing. Oh my God, that's it." So I messaged him, and then we called and talked to each other, and he said, "My Indigenous sister, of course you can use that terminology." And my God, like, so there was that instant solidarity with him. So, I know a lot of people didn't like her books, but I thought they were really good. And I think because you deal with settlers, I deal with settlers, they don't listen to us. Though, like, I can say the sky is blue, but if Kat says it, they hear it differently and better, which is insane. But it's that level of racism, that level of anti-Indigenous bias, as you know. So I really love that term, racial battle fatigue, because it just helped me try to explain it in a better way to people. Like, you just don't understand the daily racism. Like, I can't open up my Facebook without seeing the amount of deaths, the amount of injustice, the amount of police beatings, and that's just locally, let alone nationally. The amount of horrible videos that I will see, and all I'm like the first on my those like emotions. I call them emotion cons, and then everybody makes fun of me because that's not the term. It's a I use a broken heart and flowers, and I almost post that like I post it so much that's the top of my emotions that I post. And I'm like, this is what non-Indigenous don't understand. Like, this is the racial battle fatigue. Like, we are death by policy all the time, which, if there is a good thing from the death of the CEO, that people are starting to realize that their policies are killing people. And death by policy is all I talk about all the time, 24/7. And yet it's still not resonating with Canadians. So I just am so grateful you wrote this. And I feel like I'll say the same things over to you and that you understand what I'm saying. But you are also a lawyer. And I really appreciate you doing that work. My auntie, she's she's dying of cancer right now, Elaine Sasakamoose. And she was the one who became one of the first NA lawyers. She just got a Lifetime Achievement Award. I love her. I'm super proud of her. She was that cool auntie that would always get me like a David Bowie t-shirt whenever she went to a concert. Like she's just that really cool person to me. And so, I know like the sacrifice that she has done. And at the Lifetime Achievement Award, she said when she first joined this whole thing, it was really scary for her. She said every time she went to court, she cried. And that what she also found was how hard it was for people to understand work-life balance. And I mean, she never, after she became a lawyer, I never seen her anymore. Even at funerals and weddings, if they came, it was like 5 minutes, maybe, like I just didn't get a chance to really see her or talk to her anymore. And that's the sacrifice I found. And then the two people who kind of like introduced her and said her name properly. Holy, don't get me started. My mom was yelling, "Sasaka mouse! It's not hard," from the table. She was yelling at it, but then she actually had two folks from Samson Cree go up there, and they blanketed her everything. Anyway, really kind, and they said when they became lawyers that she was one of the first people that understood you want to have a family, you want to have dinner, single moms, almost all of them. And so for them, she was different. She understood. And like my auntie was driving one of their kids to like jujitsu every week or whatever so that she could article and all the things. So like I know how hard it is, and I know because you're an Indigenous woman, it was really well said at my auntie's Lifetime Achievement Award how that is so against the grain already in the world of law. So I just wanted to acknowledge that as well, and then to be doing academia and in those circles like fucking racist as hell, even though they think they're progressive, they're so racist. But again, giving me an endorsement without knowing it, thinking they're putting me down. So thank you for being racist, academia. But unfortunately, like that student was put in this hard position, is scared to tell me. And I'm like, oh no, I know she does. And I was saying, like, giving a long list of all the other students who told me what they've said to about me behind my back, thinking I would never know. And I'm like, and they have their own cohort and they have to support each other. And so it's really hard for Indigenous students. It's really hard to continue on in academia. So I just want to recognize how you're in a position as a lawyer, a position as in academia, how isolating that can be at times, and how grateful I am you had a cohort here, Mark being a good friend throughout this entire thing with you.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, you got to look for those peeps in the crowd. Yeah, otherwise I'm toast. You just kind of spin out of control. That's my undergrad was so hard because I was one of the many. But if I get into a group, then it's like a team, right? And I'm pretty good with teams. But I'm also white passing. So I've got privilege in that I don't have a target on my back when I walk out the door. But as soon as I open my mouth, and people think that I'm going to be a token Indigenous person to them because I'm white passing, therefore I haven't gone through anything. As soon as I open my mouth, I'm in trouble.
It's
They're
true.
like, what is wrong with this person?
No, it's true. And so my dad is white. He's so white. I'm actually a daughter of the Mayflower. I'm that white. So I was following the whole American Thanksgiving and the Plymouth stuff because that's supposed to be my origins. And because of the whole ancestry thing, we finally figured it out. So I know it sounds wild, but I asked my family, this is what we're going to do. Because it turns out the founding families, like the 100 folks that were there, they have their own like little societies too. So like not only would I be a daughter of the Mayflower, but I'd be a part of this family, right? And those were my people. And I'm like, oh my God, like we have to do this. This is wild. I think it's insane personally, but it's their like well, here in Calgary, as you know, we have so much like proud settlers, right? Proud pioneers, the pioneers that will go in the stampede, and it's like, well, these are our pioneers, and how are people not talking about that more and differently? So I just think it's so wild and so incredible. And I didn't know, like as I was unpacking racism in the last 18 years, how my white father shielded me, and I didn't get it. And because my husband, he's non-status, he doesn't look typical native, but he's non-status. And so marrying a non-status, I think is why they never apprehended my kid, but I think they wanted to, right? Um, so I tell people I'm like literally the first generation to not go to Indian residential school, even though I should have. I graduated high school in 94. When my brother got into a jet ski accident, he went to the children's hospital and not an Indian hospital because that was open until 96. I didn't get my kid apprehended. I experienced racism, hands down, but I didn't get it apprehended. So I start thinking about all these things about how like proximity to whiteness matters and how that has affected me and changed the trajectory of my life as a result. And I think it's important to acknowledge those things. So I appreciate you doing that both in the book and here because I don't think non-Indigenous get it. They don't deal with racial battle fatigue and get to hear the horrid things that are regularly said. But that bigger picture is that they also don't understand that policy of, genocide and all the different layers in order to get us murdered and our policy of just erasing us in general, all of those things, right? So I just really appreciate how frank you are and how you understand it because I do find that with some natives, they don't understand all this either. So I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. This is really fruitful for me. I'm used to really dry, boring conversations. So this is really fruitful. I was energized. Usually I'm so tired by the end of the day, but I was actually energized to come to this book club and it was really rare. I'm like, well, this must be a good thing. These must be good people. I'm sensing everyone right now. I'm like, I'm freaking good to go here. So thank you everyone
Thank you.
for being here, for listening to me. And it was just so nice to meet every single one of you. So yeah, include me into that reconciliation thing. Get
I
me in
will.
there.
I'll send it to you. I'll just message you. I'll post it and then I'll message you it so that you can see it because I think it
Okay.
matters. Yeah, because solidarity matters, right? And so I appreciate you. And Kat and Rosemary, if there's anything else you'd like to say before we let her go.
Just thank you so much for being with us and sharing so much.
Thank you, Rosemary. It's nice to meet you.
I echo that as well. I'm so grateful that you were able to attend the meeting tonight. It's always an honor to meet an author that Michelle chooses. Um, yeah, just keep doing what you're doing. Know that you are seen. You are both seen, and there are people out there who value what you're doing.
I appreciate that. It's I love it. It's all about the matriarchs. Really. I really do. I really feel seen and heard, and it takes a skill to listen. So thank you.
Awesome. Whoop, whoop. That's the sound of the police. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Take
Have a
Thank
good
you,
care.
night,
everyone.
everyone.
Have a great new year.
All right, folks. I know I had sent out the email, and I seen you registered already for next year. Just real quick, I read a whole bunch of books because Richard Van Camp was here. I read Beast, which is like it's meant for young adults, so it's super sweet. There's no swearing. It's adorable, but it's also like Stranger Things adorable, where it's horror but it's with kids. And so it's and they have a soundtrack. Like so the last few things I've been listening to is that at the back of the book is a Spotify Square QR code, takes you to Spotify and tells you the playlist of what you're reading in the book. So like it's so much like Stranger Things. I can't even tell you like how it's like Stranger Things. And like a lot of Dene teachings in it as well. So it's just a fun book. So I got a few. I had that's what I'm obviously gifting to people for Christmas is are these books because they matter. The other one, and so Richard is really like he says this in Dene, when there's snow on the ground, you can say the word Witigo. So he has a series, and book one has been released of the Witigo War, and it's a graphic novel, so it's a lot of fun to like see this artistry throughout the entire book actually, and Dene teachings as well. It's a little more it's a tougher one. It's not like it's for a younger audience, but like it's a little more gritty to it. So like more for adults, I would say. Enjoying it so much. Sam read it like in one go and really liked it, and then felt empowered to be able to tell people some things from it that are different than the Cree, because like there's always this conversation in the family that's like, oh, the Cree. And we mean that as gentle as we would like Flames versus Oilers. So y'all love hockey, right? But you still have your teams. So we mean that in a gentle way. But I really enjoyed those two books. So and the first book of the Witigo War is called Wroth. I'll show it to you. I meant to have this like right there. So like look at the graphics on that, right? Like it's just wild. So obviously, the whole thing is filled with this, and I really enjoy it. So I wanted to tell you about that. And there's two other books I read. Um, so I think what happens is that Richard, he gets like all these books given to him. So when I went to the Calgary Public Library's like his talk, he's just a storyteller. You think I talk, he talks more than I talk. He's really good at it too and has incredible stories. So people give him all sorts of books. And I did get Gits Crazy Boys, Res Doctor, and read it, loved it. It's a total like love for Esther Tailfeathers, and like it's just so heartwarming. So really love that book. But he gave away these two books, and I had to trade these for this one because it's about a gay hockey player, and it's called Between the Pipes. It has a bear and like a rainbow. It's just a cute story for someone struggling with their indigeneity, but also their queerness, right? So I really enjoyed that book as well. Story by Albert McLeod. He's kind of a well-known two-spirit elder in my world. For folks who aren't online, of course, they would never know, or in the Indigenous like online world, I mean. Um, so really, really love that book because Satu Dene invented hockey, and I will fight anybody who says otherwise. And this is like where a Cree would chime in and say, "But we made it better," because this is Sakamosa's Cree. Anyway, I'm getting off track. Really love that book, Between the Pipes. And again, just a very short graphic novel that's adorable. So good for any possible queer teen in Canada. That's a good one. Surviving the City, Volume 2, From the Roots Up. It says Dez's grandmother passed away, grieving and nowhere else to go. Des is living in a group home. On top of everything else, is navigating a new relationship and coming to her identity as a two-spirit person. And it kind of like that's the story, and it's quite short, and another graphic novel. But again, if for I wanted those two for my child more specifically, and so like and I've been reading like wild, been loving every minute of it, enjoying reading again, and yeah, I just really wanted to share that. And Rosemary, there was and any other listeners. Andrea Menard put into the comments website to indigenousconnection.org. And that, so just along the topic of what we were talking about for anybody who is interested in that as well. So, so yeah, I think that's it.